Hamas is pushing a horrendous yet successful brainwashing campaign, with world media organizations only happy to cooperate and print nonstop headlines about starving children in Gaza, and tragically being echoed by some in Israel's own media. Pumping these Hamas propaganda points as false news is extremely dangerous, specifically to the hostages still in Gaza. These headlines are a weapon in Hamas's hands, encouraging the terror group to harden its negotiating stance. Why should Hamas agree to a ceasefire deal when they see world leaders, journalists, and even Israelis themselves pressuring the Israeli government to surrender because they see these horrible headlines, children starving in Gaza? They believe the tide of public opinion will eventually force Israel to give in to all their demands. And every time Israel caves in to more demands, whether from Hamas or the international community, because again, the Trump administration is pressuring for this to happen, or internal pressure, it only strengthens Hamas's resolve not to release our hostages. You don't negotiate by showing your enemy how much you're willing to bend. And you definitely do not negotiate with genocidal Islamists by signaling weakness in bending to their demands. Hamas should be the one begging us for a deal, not the other way around. That's exactly where things stood before the first ceasefire in the beginning of the war. Hamas were cornered, desperate, on the verge of collapse. But then the Biden administration forced Israel to allow so-called humanitarian aid. And since then, Hamas has regained its footing. The Hamas terrorists haven't faced true existential threat since. Yes, we're doing unbelievable damage to them in Gaza, but they don't care how many civilians die. It just fuels their propaganda war. Every dead child in Gaza becomes another tool to demonize Israel, and every dead terrorist is quickly replaced by a new recruit. So as long as they receive food, fuel, and aid keep flowing to them thanks to international pressure, Hamas has zero incentive to surrender or release our hostages. Hamas is sitting comfortably in tunnels watching the world do their bidding and pressuring Israel for them. The only way to change the equation is full military victory in Gaza. Israel must take over Gaza, separate civilians from the terrorists, destroy Hamas completely, and shut the door on the nightmare that's taking place there once and for all. Those who think they're helping the hostages by pushing for a ceasefire are doing the exact opposite. It's time for clarity. It's time to stop playing Hamas's game. Israel must achieve total victory, a full military takeover of Gaza, separating civilians from Hamas terrorists, dismantling Hamas completely, and paving the way for true long-term security, including the implementation of Trump's Gaza immigration plan. Only then will the nightmare end. Only then will we bring the hostages home. Only then will we secure peace for Israel and the entire region with no more Islamo-Nazi entity in Gaza. Now let's deal with the deeper issue of these horrific, libelous headlines about children starving in Gaza, which they're not. It's no longer subtle. The mask is off. What we're witnessing today in Gaza is not just a humanitarian effort gone wrong. It's the weaponization of international aid in service of a deeper, dangerous, and increasingly blatant anti-Israel agenda. And at its core, that agenda is not just about delegitimizing the state of Israel. It's about perpetuating a decades-old hatred of the Jewish people, repackaged under the banner of human rights and humanitarian concern for Gazans. But I want to be absolutely clear. The aid distribution system in Gaza is not about helping innocent civilian Gazans. If that were the case, the world would be rallying behind any effort to ensure aid reaches those in need in Gaza without empowering Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that openly calls for Israel's destruction and hide behind its own people as human shields. But instead, what have we been seeing? The exact opposite. Every time Israel or Western-backed organizations like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation attempt to bypass Hamas and deliver aid directly and transparently to the Gazans, there's immediate backlash. Not just from Hamas, but from the very institutions that claim to represent international values, the United Nations, European Union, and Western governments. Since the American Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid began distributing this aid to Gaza, Hamas and the United Nations have done everything in their power to stop it and not coordinate with it or help make it work. Why? Because this aid system, which is being monitored by Western powers and funded by the United States, is a threat to Hamas's dominance in Gaza. Aid entering Gaza outside of their control strips them of power. The more aid that reaches the Gazan population directly and transparently, the less control Hamas has over Gaza, and that is something Hamas cannot tolerate. Through Hamas's control over the United Nations, Hamas has turned the aid distribution system into a money-making scheme. Aid does not reach the people it needs when it's given out by the United Nations. Instead, it gets diverted. Hamas takes it and sells it on the black market in Gaza. It gets siphoned into the pockets of Hamas terrorists. They have turned the humanitarian situation into a weapon of war, manipulating it for leverage and keeping the Gaza population in perpetual state of dependence upon them. Hamas. It's not a coincidence that the United Nations, which has been complicit in this system for decades, not just during this war, has done nothing to challenge Hamas's abuse of aid. It's not a coincidence that when a tragedy strikes like the October 7th massacre, the world's media immediately blames Israel, yet completely ignores the role Hamas played in orchestrating the violence and the brutality. The narrative that the West needs to provide more aid to Gaza, that Israel is causing starvation, is nothing but a smokescreen to allow Hamas to continue its reign of terror. And again, remember, Hamas people run United Nations and UNRWA in Gaza. In fact, it's the United Nations delivery of aid, channeled through Hamas-controlled warehouses, because again, the United Nations is Hamas in Gaza, that is directly responsible for the deaths of innocent civilians. The deaths aren't a byproduct of the aid, they are a consequence of Hamas's exploitation of that aid system. Why? Because the aid system in Gaza has become a tool, not for peace or relief, but for demonizing Israel. For decades, the United Nations, especially through UNRWA, has allowed itself to be absorbed into Hamas's infrastructure. UNRWA workers are Hamas. UNRWA teachers in the UNRWA schools are Hamas. Aid warehouses of the United Nations are weapons depots of Hamas. UN schools become rocket launching platforms. And when Israel dares to expose or respond to this corruption, their narrative is twisted. Israel is targeting civilians. Israel is starving children. Or Israel is committing war crimes. Meanwhile, Hamas continues to steal the aid, sell it on the black market to its own starving citizens, enrich its leaders, feed its terrorists, and tighten its grip over Gaza's desperate population, while torturing and starving our hostages that nobody in the world or the world media is talking about. No one's lifting a finger to help save our hostages or talk about that. Worse still, when Israel is not in control of the aid, like in the recent tragedy involving United Nations aid trucks entering Gaza from the north, and dozens die in a stampede, or Hamas gunfire towards them, the headlines still blame Israel. Why? Because the agenda is not about facts, it's about framing. It's about feeding the relentless narrative that Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East that feeds its enemy in the middle of a war and saves a population in Syria from being massacred, the Jews, that we're the villain, no matter what the truth is. And let's not kid ourselves. This isn't just anti-Israel. This is pure Jew hatred in a modern form. It's the same ancient hatred dressed up in the language of human rights. When Western leaders, like Britain's Foreign Minister David Lammy, condemns Israel's aid delivery mechanisms as inhumane, while ignoring how Hamas has weaponized aid to maintain its reign of terror, that's Britain is not standing up for morality. That's Britain enabling evil and revealing their true priorities. And that's only one world leader. If the Western world genuinely cared about Gazan lives, the international community would be demanding that Hamas release every last hostage of ours in Gaza, surrender unconditionally, and allow aid to flow directly to the people, not through its terror tunnels or corrupt cronies. Instead, they fund and empower the very organization, Hamas, responsible for every death in Gaza, while demonizing Israel for trying to do what they, the international community, should be doing: getting aid to people without strengthening terror and allowing Israel to defeat an evil enemy with a victory. There is no excuse. The Western world's behavior, the obsessive condemnations of Israel, while excusing justifying or ignoring Hamas's crimes, exposes the depth of the anti-Israel, Jew-hating agenda driving global diplomacy today. And we must remember, this isn't just a political fight. This is spiritual. It's historical. God's eternal promise to Abraham from the Bible stands tall in the face of all this hypocrisy. Those who bless the Jewish people will be blessed. Those who curse the Jewish people will be cursed. The nations of the world are making their choices, and history once again will judge them. How do we end this horrible situation with Gaza? Ending the Islamo-Nazi terror regime to never threaten us again? There is only one long-term solution in ending this terror from Gaza. Destroy Hamas, save our hostages, and implement Trump's mass immigration plan for Gazans, and return Jewish sovereignty to Gaza. Yes, we must make Gaza Jewish again. The world will go absolutely insane over this idea, but that's because the world has gotten used to Jewish weakness, to Israel apologizing for existing, and to us endless appeasement of genocidal terror. That era is over. No more bowing to Western governments that fund Hamas. No more pandering to global institutions that condemn Israel for defending itself while propping up terrorists. We Jews in Israel today are done playing defense. We are going to do what must be done to end the evil that we face, and that includes reclaiming all the land that was stripped from us back in the year of 2005 under the false premise of peace with our Arab neighbors, because we gave away the Gaza back in 2005. Peace doesn't come from surrender. It comes from moral clarity, unapologetic Jewish power, and the courage to stand against a world that has chosen to support evil. And yes, sometimes history slaps you in the face with clarity. And that moment is now. 25 so-called civilized Western nations just issued a joint statement not condemning the genocidal terrorists of Hamas, but condemning Israel, the one country fighting tooth and nail to defeat those very savages and free innocent hostages in Gaza. The statement from these countries shamefully accuses Israel of depriving Gaza of human dignity, while saying nothing about Hamas's use of children as human shields, hospitals as military bases, humanitarian aid as war strategy, and how the whole Gaza population is part of a genocidal culture that celebrated the October 7th massacre and mass rape of our children, literally shouting and cheering as our hostages were being driven down the streets of Gaza on October 7th. So I want to be blunt. This statement from the 25 nations is not just morally bankrupt, it is an act of cowardice. And worse, complicity. Let's call it for what it is. A global diplomatic lifeline thrown to Hamas. The message that these Western governments just sent was loud and clear. Quote, don't release the hostages, don't surrender, keep holding out, because we, the Western governments of the world, will keep pressuring Israel for you, Hamas. This is evil dressed in virtue signaling. It's the West pitying the perpetrators of genocide, not their victims, and it's disgusting and immoral. As U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee rightly said, and I quote, disgusting. 25 nations put pressure on Israel instead of the savages of Hamas. Gaza suffers for one reason. Hamas rejects every proposal. Blaming Israel is irrational, end quote, from U.S. Ambassador Huckabee. Exactly. While much of the Red-Green Alliance around the world openly celebrated October 7th, when Hamas mutilated innocent Israelis and paraded rape as resistance, and weaponized its own people and hides behind mothers, grandmothers, babies, even in hospitals, the West blames the only country doing everything possible to stop them. The same country that sends humanitarian aid to the same enemy trying to destroy it. The same country that, despite the lies of the United Nations, has done more to protect civilians in Gaza than any army in modern warfare, according to urban warfare expert John Spencer of West Point. Where is the outrage at Hamas for rejecting every ceasefire deal and putting in immoral, despicable demands of Israel? For prolonging the war, for refusing to release innocent hostages, even after Israel repeatedly say yes to every single deal, even agreeing to the horrendous conditions that Hamas gives that endangers the Israeli population. Instead, the world accuses Israel of prolonging the war. It is the sickest inversion of morality we've seen since the Holocaust. On top of that, these nations haven't spoken a single word demanding that the International Red Cross visit our hostages in Gaza, nearly 2 years after they were brutally taken. The Western world's silence, their acceptance of this evil, and their blatant anti-Israel bias screams to the heavens. But here's the silver lining. The lines are clearer than ever. It's not just Israel versus Hamas anymore. This 2-year war has highlighted, like never before, the forces of good versus the forces of evil in the world. And no, that's not hyperbole. That's reality. Israel is the only nation in the Middle East where minorities thrive, where women are equal, where Christians grow, and where Muslims live freer than anywhere else in any one of the Arab Muslim Middle East countries. Who are defending the Jews of Syria when the West stands by and watches them be slaughtered? The Jewish state of Israel. Who took in injured Syrian civilians and quietly treated them in our hospitals with dignity and respect during the Syrian civil war a number of years ago? Israel. Who leads the world in medical innovation, disaster relief, even to enemy countries, and moral clarity even while under constant existential threat? Again, the Jewish state of Israel. Meanwhile, our Islamo-Nazi enemies, whether Sunni or Shia jihadists, have done nothing but spread death, misogyny, Jew-hating anti-Semitism, and darkness around the world. The more the Western world panders to evil, the more it exposes its own decline. These 25 countries are not just failing to stand with Israel, they are betraying their own values, their own democracies, their own people. They are throwing moral clarity into the gutter and lighting it on fire, just to appease genocidal thugs who chant from the river to the sea. The West has abandoned its Judeo-Christian foundation by discarding the very Judean values from which Christian morality was born. Well, let this be our response. From the river to the sea, there will be one Jewish state of Israel, free. Sovereign, secure, strong, with zero tolerance for terror, and zero patience for those who enable it. So to the morally confused leaders and journalists and pundits of the West, you have made yourselves irrelevant. We've seen where your weakness leads, and we reject it. We in Israel will stand tall, not just for our own people, but for the free world, which is quickly forgetting what freedom even means or how to protect your freedom. Because at the end of the day, the Jewish state of Israel will remain what we've always been, a light unto the nations. And in a world this dark, that light has never been more necessary. Am Yisrael Chai. We will have total victory. We will emerge as the true light to the nations and overcome this darkness that has taken over not just the Middle East, but the whole freedom-loving world. We're here. We're working on it. We're coming. If you are not yet a subscriber to our daily, belief-based, inspiring, politically incorrect, truthful videos about Israel, the Jewish people, and the freedom-loving world, what are you waiting for? Go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe today. And yes, we are a donor-based operation. We need your donations for support in order to make these videos and get our videos seen and do all the work we do. So every once in a while, whether a large donation or a small donation, just go to pulseofisrael.com and click on the donate button. Shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.